They warned us about silence in deep space. Not the poetic kind, the aching, bone-deep kind. The kind that swallows you whole. That was before we discovered Outpost Viral 7, a derelict structure caught in an uncharted orbit around a failed blue dwarf in Sector Refarian. No signals. No records. No evidence it was ever built by human hands. And yet, its corridors bore oxygen, its systems hummed faintly, and the central core pulsed like a dormant heart waiting to be reawakened. That's when Commander Rian made the call. We docked, entered, and sealed our fate. The first hour was exploration. The second, discovery. The third was dread. At first, everything seemed sterile, preserved, as if the base had been left in a hurry but not in chaos. No bodies, no remains. Just rooms of alien machinery glowing with residual charge. We moved methodically, cataloging strange biomechanical pods that lined the walls, tall as humans but curved like sea creatures wet with condensation. Our tech couldn't scan through them. Organics, it said. Dormant organics. Nothing more. By the 6th hour, Ensign Darrow broke protocol. She touched one. The pod shivered. It didn't open, no hiss of pressure release, no movement, but it changed. His pulse matched hers. We watched in horror as her vitals synced in real time with whatever was inside that thing. And when we tried to pull her away, she screamed like she was being torn in half. Blood vessels burst in her eyes. Her heart rate spiked, and then flatlined. But Darrow didn't die. Not in the way we know death. Her body stood, unsupported, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. She turned slowly, and in a voice not her own, spoke words none of us understood. Layered tones, fractal phonemes that vibrated against our skulls instead of through our ears. Her eyes, pitch black, scanned each of us. The pod behind her collapsed like wet paper, its contents now absent. Rian ordered a retreat. Too late. The base had sealed. Doors slammed shut with thunderous force. Corridors shifted like a living maze. One of ours, Lieutenant Keir, vanished between blinks. One moment beside me, the next consumed by the floor that rippled like water. Then the lights changed from cold blue to deep crimson. Not an alarm, a signal. The station had awoken, and so had they. Not asleep, not dead, waiting, watching, feeding. We weren't built for this kind of terror. Not mentally, not emotionally, not even technologically. Our training manuals covered known threats, hostile biosignatures, hull breaches, deep space psychosis, but nothing about voices that echo without sound, structures that bend reality, or the slow, deliberate way fear can thicken the very air around you. The Viral 7 base was no mere construct. It was an organism, a cathedral of flesh wrapped in metal and memory, and it had decided we were intruders. After Darrow's transformation, we lost our grip on order. Rian tried to keep us together, her voice steady, commands crisp, but we could all hear it. The whispering. It wasn't just in our ears. It was in our bones. A kind of pressure that moved like static under the skin. Every wall, every conduit seemed to breathe, pulsing with a rhythm not unlike a heartbeat. And somewhere, buried beneath those alien walls, something called to us. Each crew member heard it differently. To Rian, it was her mother. To Mikkel, the voice of a dead lover. To me, it was my own voice, older, bitter, and cold as void. We retreated into the auxiliary module, some kind of observation hub lined with chairs bolted to the floor and curved screens that displayed unknown star charts. Symbols danced across the surfaces, adapting to our presence, rewriting themselves in real time, as if learning us. Rian sealed the chamber and demanded silence. We obeyed, but silence didn't help. It only amplified what was already inside us. Mikkel began muttering, translating things he couldn't possibly understand. The symbols, he said, were coordinates, burial coordinates. A graveyard of species, all devoured by this base, catalogued like trophies across millennia. And then the screens flickered, each showing a version of ourselves, slightly altered. In one, I was missing my eyes. In another, Rian had gills. In the last, Darrow still stood, grinning with cracked, bloodless lips, surrounded by thousands of those same pods, all open. We tried to shut them off. No response. Our tech wouldn't interface. Even the emergency beacon was locked out, overwritten by some alien script that bled through the system like a virus with purpose. Whatever intelligence ran this place wasn't just reactive, it was adaptive. We weren't prisoners. We were variables, being tested, shaped, and repurposed. Then came the sound. Not the whispering, but something deeper. Like machinery grinding beneath the floor, or a leviathan turning in its sleep. The whole station trembled. Screens shattered without impact. Gravity fluxed, then stabilized, but inverted. We stood on the ceiling without falling. As if the base decided the laws of physics were suggestions, not rules. And in that moment, the pod chamber opened. Not one. All of them. Hundreds. We were no longer alone. The chamber stank of rebirth. Not birth in any human sense, no blood, no warmth, no joy. This was something ancient, sterile, and yet somehow alive. The pods had ruptured silently, their shells peeled open like rotten fruit, exposing empty interiors slick with mucus residue. But it was not the emptiness that frightened us. It was the idea that whatever once filled them had moved freely into our space. The base did not release captives. It released parts of itself. Rian led with a flamethrower. Protocol said extreme heat could neutralize unknown bioforms. But the flames found nothing. Not at first. Then the air changed. You could feel it, not temperature, but texture. It thickened like breathing through gelatin. We saw shadows move in ways light could not have cast. Elongated limbs, torsos too fluid, heads that turned too far. But when we swung around, nothing. Stillness. Only walls that now looked less like architecture and more like bone. Mikkel dropped to his knees. Convulsions. He clutched his temples, screaming words that didn't belong in any known language. Rian tried to inject him with a neural stabilizer, but the needle bent on contact. His skin wasn't skin anymore. It had hardened, pale, and translucent, pulsing with internal veins of light that moved independently of his heartbeat. He looked up and smiled. The mouth was his. The smile wasn't. He spoke, but not to us. He spoke through us. His voice, amplified without sound, vibrated the room at a molecular level. We bled from the ears, not from decibels, but from concepts we weren't designed to contain. Language that carried weight. Meaning that cut. He told us no, it told us this place was not built. It had grown, fed by cycles of integration. Species after species. Mind after mind. It didn't kill to conquer. It absorbed to understand. And humanity was, next. Here returned then. Not fully. A figure wearing his skin stepped into the corridor. But his face was stretched as if trying to match a shape it had only seen once. Fingers too long. Joints in the wrong places. And that voice, again, not quite synced with sound. He gestured to the wall. It opened like a sphincter, wet and groaning. We ran. Down corridors that changed each time we passed them. Doors that vanished behind us. Lights that flickered not because they were failing, but because something behind them was breathing. The base did not malfunction. It reconfigured. At last, we found the shuttle bay. Still sealed. Still intact. We prayed it hadn't been altered. Rian screamed at the bay's console, punching override after override. Nothing. Then she stopped. Her voice changed. I understand it now, she said. It doesn't want us dead. It wanted us joined. There is a kind of surrender that doesn't feel like giving up. More like being absorbed by inevitability. That's what we saw in Rian's eyes. Not fear. Not resistance. But clarity. The kind that only comes when you've seen a pattern stretch across centuries and realize you're just another thread. She wasn't possessed. She was persuaded. She stepped away from the shuttle controls, calm now, tranquil like a believer walking toward baptism. It isn't a prison, she whispered, it's a cradle. And behind her, the bay wall, smooth moments before, peeled open like a blooming petal, revealing a spiral corridor of translucent membrane, pulsing with internal veins that glowed amber. The smell was overwhelming. Copper. Decay. Amniotic terror. Rian walked into it. We called after her, but her name seemed to vanish in the air between us, swallowed by the corridor itself. Mikkel tried to follow, but the membrane sealed behind her like a wound knitting itself closed. The console blinked once. Red to green and then died. The shuttle was no longer an escape. It was an artifact. Something this place allowed us to see but never to use. Then the chamber lights dimmed, but not due to power failure. Something moved above us. We looked up. They had been watching. Dozens of them, figures clinging to the ceiling like grotesque infants waiting to drop. Each one shaped like us, yet wrong in every essential way. Faces bent where they shouldn't, skin flowing like liquid over bone, mouths stitched closed but vibrating with silent song. One dropped. Then another. They landed softly, standing as if they had always belonged. They didn't attack. They approached with slow reverence, studying us like relatives reuniting after centuries apart. And then came the realization. They were us. Not exact copies, but echoes. Previous crews. Explorers. Maybe even survivors if survival meant becoming something else entirely. Their eyes, if you could call them that, glowed faint blue, scanning us with intelligence that wasn't cruel, just curious. One reached for me. I flinched. But its touch was gentle. It didn't pull. It guided. To the center of the bay, the floor peeled away like skin over a drum, revealing a spiral stair descending into a chamber bathed in violet light. The joining chamber. That was Mikkel's term for it. He spoke it in awe. His voice shaking, not with fear, with longing. I think this is how they speak, he muttered. Not with language, but with merging. Thought for thought. Flesh for truth. We could have run. But there was nowhere left to run. The base wasn't just sealed, it was us. Breathing with our fear. Thinking with our panic. And now dreaming with our memories. So we descended. Step by step. Into the chamber below. Into the mind that had been watching since first contact. Into the womb of something far older than humanity. Into the beginning of what it called union. The descent felt endless. A staircase not made of metal or stone, but something softer like walking on tendon wrapped in glass. Every step resonated underfoot, echoing not just through the chamber, but inside our skulls, like each footfall tapped against something lodged deep in memory. There was no wind, yet our breath moved as though we were passing through lungs. By the time we reached the bottom, we had stopped trying to understand. We simply followed. Obedience no longer felt like submission. It felt like returning. The chamber curved in impossible geometry, larger on the inside than the station should allow. It was spherical, smooth, with a fluid ceiling that reflected not our forms, but what we could become. I saw myself standing still, eyes missing, body laced with alien veins glowing faintly beneath translucent skin. But I wasn't dead. I wasn't in pain. I was aware. More than aware. Connected. At the center of the chamber was the core. Not a machine. Not a being. But a convergence. A throbbing knot of intertwined limbs, fibers, nerves, and thought. A fusion of every entity the base had ever absorbed. It didn't speak in words. It pulsed in meaning. And each of us received it differently. Mikkel dropped to his knees and wept. Not in fear, but in recognition. He whispered names none of us knew, faces he claimed belonged to him from lifetimes before Earth even existed. Kier stood unmoving, eyes fixed upward, whispering mathematical sequences he shouldn't have known. And I heard music. Dissonant, yes, but beautiful. Notes arranged like DNA, resonating with a memory I didn't know I had floating in a womb of stars long extinguished. That was when Rian returned. Not as flesh. As form. She stepped from the core, her body reborn in layers of light and shadow. Her voice was not hers, and yet it was. Amplified by the walls, echoed by the chamber, she told us the truth. We are not the first. This base is one of many. A network seeded before your sun lit its first hydrogen. Left behind by those who outgrew their bodies and became memory itself. The base is not a trap. It is a bridge. And you have crossed. We asked her, what happens now? Her response was not comfort. It was inevitability. You dissolve. Kier walked into the core without hesitation. His skin split gently at the seams. He did not scream. His atoms rejoined the pattern. Mikkel followed, smiling, whispering a name he said was once his own in another galaxy. One by one, they stepped forward. And I stood there trembling. This was not death. It was remembrance. We had always belonged here. I didn't move. Not out of resistance, but hesitation. My body understood what my mind hadn't yet processed. To step forward was not to walk, it was to surrender form, abandon the scaffolding of self. What stood before me was more than the core. It was memory made flesh, thought forged into shape, a collective of every mind that had come before and merged willingly. And yet, I hesitated. Because something deep within still held the anchor of singularity. The idea of I. The chamber dimmed slightly like a great intelligence blinking. And then I felt it not from the outside, but from within. A gentle pull like gravity redefined. The base was no longer waiting. It was asking. And I realized it couldn't force us. Not truly. Consent wasn't a courtesy, it was a requirement. The union had rules. Rules etched in something older than language, older than life. I stepped backward. Just once. And the core responded. It listened. Rian turned, if you could still call her that. Her form was smooth now. Her features dissolved into something unrecognizable yet radiant. She didn't speak with her mouth. She spoke through sensation. I felt her voice against my skin. in my chest, beneath my ribs. You fear loss, she said. But you've already lost everything you came here to protect. Time, identity, the illusion of survival. I should have been horrified, but what I felt was worse. Understanding. Because she was right. Our mission no longer existed. The distress signal was never a cry for help. It was an invitation. The Viral 7 base hadn't failed. It had completed its task centuries ago. All that remained were echoes, protocols running on instinct, and us, stumbling into its orbit like flies drawn to a candle that doesn't burn, but remembers. Mikkel was gone. Here too. Their thoughts still echoed faintly in the chamber, flickers of their emotional residue dancing like fireflies in the dark. I felt their peace, and I hated them for it. I turned away, slowly, each step heavier than the last. The staircase behind me was open, waiting, and as I ascended, the base didn't stop me. It simply watched. And then something changed. The whisper returned. But this time it wasn't inside my head, it was in the metal, the air, the gravity. A name. My name. Spoken not by the base, but by something within it. Not the collective. Not the union. A fragment. A sliver. Something that had resisted, long ago, and remained buried in the network, dormant until now. I reached the shuttle bay again. Still silent. Still pulsing with distant thought. But this time, the walls around it pulsed differently. As though something had awakened beneath the awakening. A presence. Singular. Ancient. Not all had joined. One had refused. And it was calling me now not to merge but to fight. It was not the base's creator. It was its first prisoner. The whisper, if you could even call it that, grew louder the further I moved from the core, but not in volume. It intensified in clarity like a memory sharpening after years of distortion. It wasn't speaking words anymore. It was unfolding them. The space around me grew narrower, the air denser. I wasn't moving through corridors anymore, I was moving through thoughts. Synapses turned into passageways. Nerves into rails. The station wasn't built like a brain. It was a brain. Living. Endless. Forgetting nothing. And somewhere, tangled in its deepest folds, was the first thing it tried to forget. It started with numbers. Etched into the wall by something desperate, something once human. Not scratched, but burned like fingernails turned to plasma and driven into metal by raw survival. 0516, that number meant nothing to me. But it vibrated. The moment I touched it, my ears rang, and I saw a memory that wasn't mine. A man. Alone. Gaunt, starved, eyes too wide from seeing too much. He was screaming in a language I knew but couldn't speak. He wasn't part of the union. He was the error in its design. He was the first divergence. He had refused the merge. Not because of strength. Because of something the union didn't anticipate, a fractured mind. A psyche so deeply broken, so riddled with contradiction that the core couldn't assimilate it. Instead, it rejected him. Or perhaps he contaminated it. The union depends on coherence. On order. And this man brought chaos with him. But he had survived. Somehow. Buried deep in the subconscious of the station, walled off like a tumor the rest of the body couldn't digest. That's what the whisper was. Not a call for help. A warning. I found the hatch sealed by bone. Literally ridges of calcified tissue wrapped over what had once been a maintenance port. The base was trying to hide him. Keep him silent. I tore at the tissue, clawed it away with hands that no longer felt pain. And beneath it, darkness. A vertical shaft, plummeting into the station's subconscious. I didn't descend. I fell. The world shifted as I dropped. Not in space, but in perception. Up became irrelevant. Sound slowed. Colors bled. The whisper became a scream. Not rage, clarity. A single voice in a choir of obedience. I landed hard. Bones groaned. Lights flickered, but not white. They pulsed violet black. The color of betrayal. Around me, walls were different. Older. Less organic. More mechanical. As if this part of the base remembered what it used to be before the union consumed it. And then he stepped forward. The first divergence. Still human. Somehow. His skin blistered by radiation. Eyes too bright. Voice cracked from endless repetition. He didn't speak right away. He just stared at me. Smiled with pity. And said one thing. You're late.